what's up YouTube? So I'm just going to go over a few things that you need for your subwoofer install. So this is a whole entire video dedicated to a sub install on a factory head unit on a car. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and yeah, so there's not much to it. So without further ado, let's get going. Okay, so these are the tools that you're going to need to use. You're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver. You're going to need a socket kit, metric or standard, depending on what your car is. Mine's a Mazda, so it's metric. You are going to need, obviously, your subwoofer. You're going to need your amp. You're going to need your box. You're going to need a head unit, if you're doing this on a regular head unit, not a factory one. Or you're going to need something called an LOC. Now, LOC, I threw out the box, but an LOC converts speaker wires to RCA outputs. So that's it. Other things you're going to need, maybe like a thin, strong wire that's hard to bend, and that way you can tape the wire around it and then wrap it into it. I found that to be kind of helpful. You might need a dash pulling kit. I never used one on my car because it's pretty straightforward. I didn't need it. And obviously you're going to need a car and a wiring kit. You're going to need a wiring kit. Depending on your watts and RMS, I would suggest either 8 gauge, 4 gauge. So if you're going for 500 watts RMS or up, I would choose 4 gauge. It's just better. So without further ado, let's get started. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to prep your car. This is pretty straightforward. Open up the passenger and the driver's side windows. Make sure your car is in park, or if you have a manual, put it in gear. Make sure your emergency brake is on. Pretty straightforward. I would suggest leaving your keys on the seat. This way, if your door's locked, you always have access to them. So that's pretty straightforward. Next thing you want to do is you want to pop your hood. And you want to go and disconnect the ground battery, the ground wire to the battery. So we're going to go over here, and pop this open. Lift this up. Okay. And you want to locate your battery. Mine's underneath the battery box. So now I have my sub already installed, but this is just a general guide. It'll get you somewhere, get you started pretty quickly. So there you go. There's your battery. What you want to do is you want to disconnect the negative ground wire. That's going to your body. So disconnect that, put it in there. Do know when you do this, your whole inside your car might, the whole interior, dashboard and all that is going to need to be reset. Some radios have anti-theft on them, so you're going to need the code to put it in. Alright, so that's prepping your car. So you're going to disconnect that power lead. For right now, what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be taking this out. This is my positive wire going to the sub. It's a 50 amp fuse. I'm just going to pulling this out so I can show you how to do this stuff. And so there's no power going to my amp. So there you go. That's that. Got that. So once you have your negative terminal disconnected, next thing you want to do is start prepping the rest of the car. So we are going to do that now. That includes taking out all the side panels, going all the way down to the side of the car on either side. You want to do both sides. I'll explain why. So for the Mazda, pretty simple. There's one, which pops right up. And the other one, I don't know if you can see it inside there. You see that little grommet? You need to pop that out with a screwdriver, and then this pops off. So this is where your flathead comes in. So you're going to do that. The center one just pops right out, just like that. You don't need to take the center one fully out, unless you want to. Back one. Pops right out just like that. And again, the center just pops right back out. There you go, center's out. Also, if your back seat comes out, that would be helpful. With the Mazda, I don't know why that was zoomed in. With the Mazda, pretty simple. Pop up, and then the whole back seat will come out. I'm not going to fully take it out. And now you want to do the same thing with the other sides. Also in your trunk, open up your trunk. Also, it's also helpful, well, your battery's going to be disconnected, but I would turn off all those lights just to make sure. This way when you connect it, you know, you don't kill your battery. So again, sub's in there, ignore that. But you want to take out all this stuff over here. So I'm going to get to that. Alright, so we're back here. So what you want to do is you want to tear out your whole and back higher area over here. Just get it down to the bare metal. So just like that. Ignore those wires, you won't have those wires there. So yeah, bare metal, and what might help is loosening up the seats so you can move them around. So yeah, that's that. You have that bound to the bare metal, you're golden. Make sure you do not lose any of the screws, and after that you'll be all set. So let's go on to the next step. Alright, so we're here at the next step. The next step, the hardest part out of any sub install, is getting this wire, which could be either 4 gauge or 8 gauge. This is 8 gauge, so it's kind of small. It's 8 gauge. Yeah, it's 8 gauge. Through the firewall. It's the hardest part of any sub install, so I'll show you how to do that. So, these are the most common places. I'll show you on the inside. This is the part where you might want to start taking out your rugs over here and getting down to the bare metal. This I'm going to leave in. I don't have a reason to take it out right now. But my car is clutch. It's a manual. So you can't put it through the clutch plate. However, on some of the automatic Mazdas, at least for the first gens I know, you can stick that wire through the clutch plate. And it's just a rubber grommet. You can just poke it right through. That would be ideal, but sometimes you can't do that. So some other places you might want to think about putting it. Some people, like if you have enough wire, some people run it all the way across, out, and go through the main wiring harness on that side. I'll show you. That's on the passenger side. So they run it from the battery terminal, whatever, all the way across, and they go through the main wiring harness, which is right there. I don't know if you can see that boot, but it's right there. That's what a lot of people do. Other people put it through the brake, put it through the steering column. Well, actually it was pretty simple. All cars have these latches, and they're always a cable on them. So I found that, and that just happened to be right there for me. And so what I did, I took the grommet out. I don't know why this is not focusing. There we go. I took the grommet out, and I slid this wire through the grommet. I cut the grommet, and the grommet just wraps right around it. So you could get fairly thick wire through that hole. Let me focus this for you. Okay, so you could get fairly thick wire through that hole. As you can see, it's a pretty big hole. So you could, like, taking your time, you might actually be able to fit 4 gauge wire through there. Anything bigger than 4 gauge, now you're kind of on your own. So if you're using 4 gauge wire for a sub anyway, you're probably not going to be on the stock head unit. So anyway, that's what you do there. That's what I did. That's what seemed to work the best. So let's move on. So you got the wire connected over here. There's many places to do it. You could hook it up to one of these things like this, or you could buy an aftermarket one. Ideally, you want it as close to the battery terminal as possible. So this is almost right on top. So I just used the bolt that clamps it all together. Easiest way to do it. So you got that. Also, you want to install an inline fuse. And your inline fuse, you want no longer than 2 feet from the battery terminal. This came in a kit, so this is right here. It's about a foot away. Foot of wire before the fuse. Even if your amp is fused, I would suggest putting a fuse in there that is slightly higher amperage than the fuse on the amp. So if you have an 80 amp fuse on the amp, I would choose maybe like a 90 or 100 amp fuse for the battery. You could always replace it. So you run that battery through there, go through there, and then you pull it out. Now when you pull it out, sorry for the shakiness, mine happened to come out up there. Pretty simple. So now this is the part where it's really up to the end user. You want this to be as clean as possible. You don't want to be able to see any of the wires from the windows. It's less likelihood of someone breaking in your car trying to steal your shit. So what you want to do is fairly simple. Just run it underneath the carpet if you can. 4 gauge wire, it might be a little bit thick to do, but give it a shot. So now, on to the next part. You have your positive wire hooked up over there. Now it's for the second most important wire, which is the ground wire. This is this black wire over here. If you bought a kit, the ground wire will most likely be 2 feet in length. You want the ground wire to be as short as possible, and you also want it to be on bare metal. So this right here is good. You have to sand this off and get it down to the bare metal, but that's a good spot. Some people don't have access to this, or some people don't want to drill a hole. So the next best spot is somewhere on the rear seat mounting, as you can see over there. So the reason why I'm actually showing you this video today is because I had to replace this ground. As you can see there, it's a really shitty ground. It moves around, it's half out, and you can hear it in the difference of the sub too. So that's a really shitty ground, and that's why I'm replacing this. But that is actually a very good spot to do it. I don't know if you can see, but there's a hole there, and that was pre-drilled already. So all you have to do is sand it all down, basically bolt it in so it's nice and secure and does not move at all. Same with the other side. Right there, as you can see, I sanded it down. And that's it for your ground. Biggest things with the ground is have it as short as possible, have it down to bare metal, and that's really it. Also, while we're on the topic with the ground wire, if you're doing a 500 watt RMS or up, you definitely do want to beef up the main chassis ground. That's this wire from here, from the negative terminal to your chassis. There's something called the Big 3 for 500 watts. It's not worth it, but it might help. We're back here with the ground again. Just wanted to show you something simple. What we want to do is use 150 grit sandpaper, or 220 grit. You want to use something fine to scrape the paint, and reason being is because you don't want to roughen up the surface, you just want to get the paint off. You want good contacting points between the actual terminal and the bare metal. So the finer that gap could be, the better. So as you can see here, fixing up this ground point, and show you what to do. So you simply just take the paper, and that's it. You do that to both sides, wherever there is metal contacting. And then the final step is to use Windex to clean off, or any type of cleaning solution to clean off any of the excess dirt. Use your bolts, bolt it in, and then use your bolts, bolt it in, and then you have a good grounding point. Okay, so you got your ground wire in and you got your positive wire. Those are the two hardest things in any sub install, especially the positive wire. So now what's next is pretty straightforward. It's connecting your actual RCA inputs, RCA cables, to the head unit, and then running them all the way back to the amp. So let's get to that. The most important thing with the RCA cables, so you have the other side torn apart over there. You have the whole down part torn apart, and now it's starting to start tearing apart your head unit. The most important thing with the RCA cables is do not run them with the main power line and the remote wire. The main power line carries a lot of amperage, and it typically between 12 and 13 volts, maybe 14 volts depending on your alternator. And the power line, the remote wire, carries a constant 12 volt. So you do not want to run the RCAs with that power wire. You want it to be as far apart as possible. And this will reduce static, it'll reduce engine whine, it'll reduce just any type of interference you'll have. So on to the next thing, the hard part. Not as hard as the power cable, actually this was pretty easy for me. So now what you're going to need is you're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver, you're going to need a flathead screwdriver, you're going to need a dash puller, you're going to need your LOC, and you're going to need the remote wire now. So let's get to that. Alright, so we're back over here. Now we're going to start installing the RCAs. So now our next biggest problem is running the RCAs from the head unit all the way back. And because the stock head units don't have RC outputs, that's where the LSC comes in. So now it's time to start taking apart the LSC, start reading the directions and getting ready. Because we're gonna need we're also gonna need a soldering iron over here. I forgot to mention that. So a soldering iron. You might also want some electrical tape, and you might also want some heat shield or heat shrink tubing. So on a Mazda, pretty simple to get the head unit out. Open up your glove box. Under here, there's some tabs. All they're running up to there. Do not pull this very end part. This one slides. It does not get pulled out. So, but there's one right next to it. So we're gonna pull that. One right next to that. We're gonna pull that and see how it just pops right up. Pull the next one. And pull the next one. So mine actually just popped back out because I've taken it off so many times. But do not pull that one. You slide it out and the whole thing will come out. You can just lay that off to the side. So now there's a bunch of screws here. The only two you need to worry about is that one and that one. So now we're going to take our Phillips head screwdriver. Watch the LCD screen. That is very delicate. And we're just going to start pulling these apart. There's one screw. Put that over there in the glove box. And here's the other screw. Now the back of the head unit is only connected by two cables. You have the antenna and you also have the wiring harness. Alright, there we go. You just put those gloves in the glove box. Screwdriver can go in the glove box too. So next thing is to pull this radio out. Okay, there you go. It's out and it's just resting on the shifter. So now what you want to do is you want to disconnect. Oops. You want to disconnect this you just pull out. Just pull that straight back out. And you want to disconnect this one. This one, there's a little button on the bottom. You got to push the button up and then pull out. I'm not going to bother doing that, but yeah, you get the point. So now the line, the 12 volt remote wire. You can see that right here. You're going to start wanting to run that all the way down. Same thing with the power wire. I just wrap mine around the power wire. That doesn't really matter. And you're going to need to get it all the way up here and get it ready. Don't lose it though. So now the neatest way to do this, mine has a little spot in the back of there where the LSC could actually hide. This is the LSC. It's by Soch. Pretty straightforward. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wires coming out of it. There is an accessory yellow wire. There is a ground black wire. And then there is 4 speaker wires. Now on the LSC itself, it tells you to wire it into the rear speakers. However, I would wire it into the front speakers, front ones. The front ones usually don't have any type of equalizer on them, and they usually respond better to bass. So you also have bass control on the head unit. So I would do that. Also, if your amp does not come with a remote wire, a remote switch, one of these to turn it up and down, you're going to definitely want to use the one for the LOC, because you definitely want some bass control more so than the head unit. So you're going to want to hook that up also. Hook up the remote wire, just solder that in there. You have the left and right. Now if you're using a monoblock amplifier, it doesn't matter which one of these gets put in, as long as they get put in, the RCA wires. And now for the fun part, this part. Usually the biggest wire in here is the ground wire. You're going to have to search on Google for your wiring harness and all the wires and what they do. And then you're going to need to splice all of them. What I did, I clipped all the wires, so I clipped them all in half. I twisted them all together and then I soldered them, slid the heat shrink over it, and then electrical taped them. So this way they're not touching at all. For me, that seemed to be the best way. There's some other ways to do it. Depends on how you want to do it. But yeah, make sure you do not cut the wires too short, because it is a one-time thing and you can't screw up. So on the LSC, there's 2 settings. You have the level for the left and right. If you have a really crappy head unit, I would adjust these about maybe 1/8, 2/8 of a turn to the left from all the way up to the highest position. And that'll get rid of some of the static that might come through the subwoofer. If you have a high quality head unit, like the Mazda ones are usually high quality, stock ones, then you can just turn those all the way up to positive on each channel and just let them be there. And that's it. So for this part, it's just up to you. You need to find the stock wiring harness on on Google, make sure it's yours for your specific car. And then you need to read the directions for the LSC to read which wire is which. And then all you do is just got to solder it all together. Takes some time, but yeah, that's what you have to do. Now your RCA cables, they're over here. You got to run them all the way down. You got to run them across the passenger box and run them all the way down the side through the back. You want to run those on the passenger side, not the driver's side where the power wire is. This way it will reduce static interference, like I said before. So once you get all that done, make sure there is no exposed wires, because you do not want to start an electrical fire, especially where there's a lot of plastic. Make sure there's no exposed wires. Make sure everything is all nice and tight. There's nothing that's going to come loose. Make sure all your connections are good, and you should be good to go. So my LSC just slides right in the back over here, right in this little pocket. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little pocket back there. And yeah, that's it. So that's pretty much it for the head unit. So at this point, you should have 4 wires coming to the back. You should have your positive wire coming from the battery. That's the red one. You should be having your remote wire, which is the really small, thin blue one. You should be having your RCA cables, and you should be having your ground wire. This is the remote wire for my sub control. I usually would do this one last. If you want to run it now, go for it. It's up to you, even if you want to use it. So, the question is, what do we do next? Pretty simple. Now we need to get the amp in, and we need to hook up all our connections to the amp. We also need to make sure all the rest of the car is nice and tidy. All the cables are hidden, because after this step, it's basically done. So let's start doing that. Okay, so as you can see, we got our whole interior back in. Now it's time to actually start installing the sub. Okay, so before we get all to the wires, I just wanted to go over something really quick. Some quick ways to mount your amp to your sub. Most people just screw it straight in. It comes with screws, but I didn't want to risk putting holes in this and having air leak out of them, because it sounds horrible. So I just went with the simple Velcro. I just bought some Velcro, taped it to the bottom of the feet, and it holds it on very nice and secure. Easiest way to do it. So your speaker wire, this could be really any gauge as long as it's bigger than 10 gauge. Maybe even 8 gauge is perfect for it. The thing is, you want it to be as short as possible. Make sure it's short. Make sure that it matches up. So negative to negative, positive to positive. Here we are again. We got a remote wire in. We got our RCA input pin. If you look on the back side, we got our ground cable in, we got a remote wire in, and we got our power cable in. And also notice how the RCA cables never even touch the power wire. That's a good thing. So next step is to go back into the front. We need to connect the fuse back into the power wire, and then we need to connect the ground cable wire. Remember, at this point you should have beefed up your ground wire. And we're going to connect the ground wire back into the battery. As you can see, we have everything set up, sort of. We got the fuse back in. We got the battery terminal back on, and now our next thing is actually starting to tune it and start setting it up. So first thing you want to do is you want to set your gain to the minimum. You want to set your low pass filter to 180 hertz. You want to set your subsonic to off, or the lowest hertz it has. Bass boost frequency set at 30 hertz, and then bass boost set that to 0 decibels. So I'm not going to go too much into this. I'm going to do gain, low pass filter, and subsonic. And I'm not going to actually show you how to do it, because being a camera microphone is not going to pick it up anyway. But I'll tell you how to do it. So first thing you want to do, start your car up. You want your car running anytime you have your amp and sub running, because this way you don't kill your battery. So start your car up and turn your head unit to 75% its volume. So on a Mazda it's at 32, the volume goes up to 32. I turned it at 30 because that's where it actually starts to distort. So turn it up to 75%, or where it actually starts to distort. So for me on my Mazda, that's 30. Volume is 30. If you're running not a non-stock head unit, what you want to do is set everything to 0. So bass boost to 0, treble to 0, fade to 0, everything to 0. No equalizers. Put it on. If you have to have an equalizer, set it to flat. Set everything to 0. So now, what you want to do is, if you don't have a stock head unit, set your normal listening, the way you normally listen to it. So turn your bass all the way up to the highest setting, turn your treble to whatever you listen to, and turn your mids to whatever you listen to. Those don't really matter so much. Turn it up, and then what you want to do is play a normal song. Play a normal song, and then start adjusting the gain. Now, at this point, we're not actually going to be adjusting the gain, tuning it yet. We just want to listen. Listen to what's coming through the subwoofer. If you hear a coil whine, or if you hear whining, or if you hear it cutting out, or anything like that, check your ground cables. Always check those first. Check all your connections, especially on the front head unit, and then check the power cable. So listen to engine whine, listen to all that stuff. If you don't hear any of that, you're golden. If you do hear that, then what you want to do after you check all the cables is go to your LOC and turn it down a little bit. Turn down the left and right channel. So once you do that and you have no more whine, now it's actually time to start setting your volume, your gain. So your gain is not volume. It's not supposed to be turned up as loud as it goes, because after a certain point it just stops getting loud. So this is what you're going to do. You set your receiver to 75% its maximum value. Your car is running. You're going to start turning your gain up. For this, I would recommend a 40 hertz test tone. So put that into a CD or put it onto an iPod, whatever, and just play it for 5 minutes or something, and just start listening while you're adjusting gain. If you're not, try to choose a song that has constant bass to it, lower bass. So anyway, I'm gonna stay with the 40 hertz test tone because that's what it's gonna sound like. When you do it, it'll be better. So your gain is on minimum, and everything else is set to what I told you to set it. You're gonna start turning your gain up to the point where the subwoofer no longer starts getting louder and it actually starts getting distorted. So that's called clipping. It's when the sub starts bottoming out. And if you look at a wave frequency, here, I'm gonna zoom this out so I can show you. If you look at a wave frequency, it's like this. It's up and down nice. When it starts clipping, it goes up, it straightens, goes down, it straightens, it goes up, it straightens. So it starts looking like teeth to a gear. You don't want that. You want it to be nice and smooth. So we're gonna zoom back in here. So start listening for clipping. If you hear that noise, you're going to turn it down about 1/8 of a turn until it's gone. Once it's completely gone, turn it down 1 more 1/8 of a turn just to be sure, and then your gain is all set. Your low pass filter, depending on what LOC you bought, I bought the Soch one, which actually has a crossover in it, so it filters out any unwanted stuff. Your low pass filter, I just kept mine on 180 hertz. So anything below 180 hertz comes in, which is good. Because the LSC blocked it out. If you don't have an LSC, then your head unit should be doing it. Otherwise, you just adjust that to how it sounds. Subsonic, anything below a certain frequency will not come through. So for me, I have that set to, that's 50 hertz right there. I have it set to about 20 hertz. Anything below 20 hertz, the sub won't even play. The amp won't allow the sub to play because you can't hear it and it just damages it. Bass boost frequency, use this in tandem with bass boost. Bass boost, I would only suggest maybe 4 decibels at the max. If you turn bass boost up, you're going to have to turn gain down a smidge. So keep that in mind. And bass boost frequency, at a certain frequency, it'll sound the loudest, it'll sound the best. Usually you tune that one to whatever the box is set to. I have mine set at like 40 hertz, around there. Bass boost, I have it set at like 4 decibels, 5 decibels. So once you get all that set, that's basically it. You're done. Okay, so what I forgot to actually mention before is if you have a bass remote knob, turn that all the way up to max when it's plugged in. This way everything is going through it, so I forgot to mention that. Alright, so you were done with the install. That's basically it. Wasn't too bad, it was very simple. If you want more info on tuning the subwoofer, that was a very basic just overview of it. Google it, there's thousands of threads on it, there's thousands of everything. Other than that, you're all set. So, like I said, hardest things are poking that red wire through the firewall and finding a really good ground. Also beefing up your ground cable. Remember, always good grounds, always good grounds. Your whole body's an electrical thing and everything is just flowing through it, especially if the unibody, which my Mazda is. So make sure you have a good ground. That is pretty much it. If it's a brand new subwoofer, do not play it on max volume for a very long time. Actually do not even hit max volume, and this will give time for the sub to actually break in and gives time for the spider on the sub to actually start flexing and that. So if it's a brand new sub, don't blast it. It's not worth it. You might blow it out. If you start having fuses blow and all that stuff, again, check your grounds, check all your connections. Maybe in about a month's time or so, after playing it a while, check the LOC, make sure none of the wires have come loose and exposed themselves. Just general stuff like that. So that is how you install a sub on a factory head unit. If you need more in-depth detail, you could definitely just Google this stuff. It's very simple. Just read directions on your LOC. That is a little bit tricky, but not that hard. Make sure you have a good soldering iron. Make sure you have good solder. And once you're all done, make sure you hide everything away nice and neat so none of the wires can be seen. And you're all good to go. If you're going over, before I mentioned about 500 watts, if you're going over 500 watts, you definitely want to you want to use a higher gauge wire, and you want to actually buy a dedicated head unit. I mean, although it does play very nice, you could always have better. So for $80 to $100, you could get a nice head unit that has already RCA outputs with a whole equalizer set up for the bass, and it'll sound a lot better. So that is it. That is my video. I hope this helped a lot of people out. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. Please like the video, rate the video, subscribe, and that's about it. So that's another one of my tutorials. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.